My mom keeps coming into my room every night to cry. I tried to tell my mom to stop, but my hand went through her shoulder. Written by @user xdarkwolf. Hi, I'm Blair Bathory, and this is the Something Scary podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first time or you're one of the brave souls who join us every week. Sometimes it's not the stories we're told that haunt us, but the ones we inherit without hesitation. The prayers whispered in the dark, the trinkets worn without asking why. Belief can be a comfort until it isn't. Because when something is passed down for so long, you stop knowing where faith ends and fear begins. First, mirror marks won't fade, followed by inherited horror. Finally, in our last story, you're getting blurry. So, wanna hear something scary? Grief makes ghosts of us all. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you summon, but what becomes of you afterward. Like in this story written in honor of Jewish American Heritage Month by Sarah. The apartment smelled like old wax and peeled onions, familiar and vaguely rotten. Leah Klein hadn't been back in almost 4 years, not since she walked away from her seminary program and traded Talmudic texts of Jewish studies for molecular biology. Science makes sense, she told her father. Miracles don't. She hadn't argued. He just said, when the world stops making sense, you'll miss miracles. She used to roll her eyes at that. Now sitting, Shiva for her dead dad, alone in the empty apartment, she wanted to throw a chair at the wall just to hear something crash. No one had come. No awkward neighbors, no Minya, just her. Her father had died alone, slipping in the bathtub of all places. No angels, no divine plan, just cracked tiles and the irony of a rabbi who drowned just like anyone else could have. The university gave her a 2-week leave. She hadn't touched a breaker or attended rounds since the call. But grief doesn't care about rational systems. It drags you down like a tide. For Leah, it pulled her to her father's office, where yellowed books leaned like tired old men and the wax from forgotten Shabbat candles formed strange, melted figures looking like monsters standing on the desk. She found the manuscript behind a stack of unopened mail, wrapped in oilskin that left a bitter smell on her hands. Tied with red thread, no label, no title. She almost tossed it, but when she opened the first page, the air in the room was sucked out, like someone had just stopped breathing. Inside, she saw a hand-bound book, thin as skin, brittle edges, a name across the top in her father's script. Shafir Harazim. She remembered hearing that name, whispers through half-closed doors, her father's voice low and tense, part prayer, part warning. A book of angelic secrets, curses, blessings too strange to be holy. The scientist in her, fluent in nerve signal pathways and how to sterilize a scalpel, snorted, another relic from a world she'd left behind. Until she saw the margin notes in her father's handwriting. Symbols marked, names circled. One of them was hers, Leah, next to a passage in Aramaic she couldn't fully translate. But she caught enough, a ritual to summit wisdom, to speak to angels. She blamed it on exhaustion at first, or the way silence starts to hum if you sit in too long. But the air had weight now, like the room was holding its breath, like it was watching. She waited until night to try it. Not because she believed, but because doubt, left too long in the dark, curls into curiosity. She drew the circle in chalk, shaky, uneven lines, like her hands had forgotten geometry. She lit 7 candles, the wax spitting angrily as they caught. She fasted, as the notes instructed. Didn't speak a word until the hour turned, just after 3:07 a.m. She spoke the names as best she could, her voice cracked. She stumbled over consonants, one syllable she had to say 3 times. The moment she finished, the room seemed to exhale. The candles pulled inward, flames bending toward the center, then stillness. Leah blinked. Nothing. She stepped out of the chalk circle, brushing at the wax on her arm. And when she saw it, a handprint on the mirror, small, smudged, like a child had pressed their palm into the glass and waited. She wiped it away, heart thudding. The next morning, it was back. So were the dreams. Her father, silent at the kitchen table, his mouth moving. But no sound came. His hands were coated in gray ash. The room around him pulsed, shadows dancing at the edge of her vision. When she woke, her sheets were damp, and her arms bore red marks shaped like letters she didn't know. She stopped sleeping. She stopped eating, but she kept reading. The book grew warmer, at first subtly, like it had absorbed her body heat. But then it pulsed under her fingers. The brittle pages softened. Symbols began to make sense. Words she didn't know spilled from her mouth when she read aloud, and then the voice began. It came from behind the mirror, not Hebrew, not Aramaic, just thought. It whispered the same thing every time. Call the name again. At first she ignored it. Then one night, she whispered the name back, half a dare, half a prayer. That night, the handprint on the mirror doubled, 2 palms, pressed side by side. She called Lila, her father's old assistant, and asked her if she was working on anything. Weird. Lila hesitated. She had been different than last year. He was working on a correction. He stopped teaching, even stopped going to shul. Leah asked if he ever mentioned the chauffeur. Lila's voice dropped. Only once. He said he'd opened something and couldn't close it. Leah flipped back to the book. Finally, she found a page folded over twice, encrusted with old wax, a correction ritual. No blood, no flesh, just a sacrifice of belief. She had to give something up, something she believed completely, speak it aloud, let it go. She sat in the circle again, didn't bother with candles, just the book, just the dark. She whispered, "There is no God." The whisper behind the mirror laughed, then silence. Then every candle in the apartment blazed to life. Then a wind tore through the study, knocking over books, but the chalk circle held. The mirror shivered, warped, then melted to black. From inside, something looked out. No face, no figure, just presence. It pressed on her chest like deep water. She couldn't move, could barely breathe. Then she heard her name. Not in the whisper, not in her father's voice, in her own. Leah. She looked down. The book had changed. New words curled across the page, lines that hadn't been there before. Fresh ink, still wet. Her name beside it. Mikor Amuna. Source of faith. And beneath that, her father's last note. To believe is to fear. To fear is to understand. The next morning, she wiped away the chalk circle. She didn't return to school. She went to shul, sat in the back, buried under layers of incense, and murmured prayers and whispered Kaddish, not just to her father, for herself. When the service ended, an older man approached, didn't speak, just handed her a folded note. Inside, a drawing of a handprint, and beneath it, in her father's handwriting, "The door can be opened by doubt, but only faith can close it." She looked up. The man was gone. But in the reflection on the synagogue's glass door, she saw a pale palm, gentle, pressed against her own, just for a moment. Have you ever dismissed something as superstition only to feel it watching you later? Did you sense a change was taking place, but you couldn't explain it? Tell us your stories by sending us an email at SomethingScary@snarled.com. So we get lots of emails from you all every week. Sometimes people are asking us to tell certain legends from a specific place, or sometimes someone will share a story about something that happened to them. We receive more stories that we can adapt for the show, so we thought it would be great to just share them informally and read some of them to you now. Here's a story from PETA. This story is from my mom's sister, Mozzie. The story goes like this. My Mozzie used to work in an all-girls college in India. She was a teacher. Since it was all girls, they only had girls' bathrooms and one stall. A girl walked into the stall and felt like someone was in there with her. She felt a hand on her shoulder. She screamed and fainted. Another girl rushed in and came out crying. Thankfully, the other girl had gotten back up, but was also crying. They called the headmistress, who ordered the bathroom to be closed. The girls couldn't talk and were in shock. They finally told everyone that there was an angry presence there, a ghost. They pointed to a faint mark of a hand on her shoulder. They were all superstitious, and so a priest was called in to pray for us. It didn't do much. She still works there and says no one uses the washroom. Thanks, PETA, for sharing that. Bathrooms can be scary for many reasons, and we made a video about a toilet goddess a couple of years ago. But if you want to check that out, it's on one of our playlists on youtube.com/snarled. Sometimes the things meant to protect us are the ones that leave the door open, like in this story inspired by Mariella. We don't talk about what happened the year my Nana died. My father says it was grief that made us unravel. My brother thinks it was just bad luck, but I know better. It started with the bracelet. Nana had given it to me when I was 10, a thin red cord knotted tightly around a single glass bead painted with the evil eye. Malakio. I didn't know then how serious she was about it. To me, it was just one of the many little charms she pressed into her palms when she came to visit. Crosses, vials of holy water. But the bracelet felt different. It was warm, even when I left it on the windowsill. After Nana passed, we flew back to her house in Calabria to help clean it out. Everything was heavy with dust and silence. The air inside her bedroom had an old weight to it, like incense left too long to rot. Her prayer books were still open on the nightstand. A half-burnt candle sat in a dish beside a bowl of salt gone gray. I found the bracelet in a shoebox at the back of her closet. I hadn't even realized I'd lost it years ago. But there it was, still knotted. The red, slightly faded, the eye in the center cracked just slightly down the middle. That night, I dreamt of her. She stood at the front of my bed, arms stiff at her sides, lips parted just enough to whisper something I couldn't hear. Her eyes were glassy, watching me too closely. I woke with the taste of copper in my mouth and 3 deep scratches on my shoulder. I told myself it was nothing, a weird dream, sleepwalking maybe. We flew home. My father boxed up the few things she'd left to me. Rosaries, old photos, a small ceramic dish that always smelled faintly of camphor. I kept the bracelet in my room, I'm sure, if I wanted to wear it. That's when things began to shift. The accident started small, a glass sliding off the counter without touching it, a candle tipping over when no one was near, my cat refusing to enter my bedroom even when I coaxed him. Then, the static. It buzzed through the walls at night, faint but constant. I thought it was electrical, maybe something with the wiring, but it wasn't. The power company found nothing. No faulty circuits, no surges. Still, the sound grew louder every night. It wasn't just buzzing anymore. It pulsed, like breath through teeth. I tried to sleep with earplugs, with the TV on, nothing worked. That's when I remembered what Nana used to say when we were kids. When the bracelet breaks, something has seen you. I checked the one I'd found in the closet. The crack in the eye had widened. The cord was fraying. One morning, I found the bead sitting by itself on my desk. The thread had come undone entirely, and that night it saw me. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. Around 2 a.m., the air went still. The buzzing stopped suddenly. Everything was too quiet, like the house was holding its breath. Then the mirror in the hallway turned black. Not shattered, not fogged, just dark. The reflection had been drained from it, like a screen that had powered off. I stared at it from the end of the hall. Something moved inside it. Not a shape exactly, but a smear of motion, the way oil distorts in water. I didn't go near it. The next day, the lights flickered whenever I walked past. My phone refused to take photos inside my room. They came out warped, static-lined, as if something was pressing against the lens from the inside. I started carrying the broken bread in my pocket, like maybe it could still protect me. But every night, the darkness inside the mirror spread, reaching from the hallway to the living room, pulling beneath door frames. My father said I was pale, asked if I was eating. I nodded, though I barely touched food in days. Every time I sat at the table, the salt clumped in its shaker, the candles blurred with blue flames. I stopped praying. I couldn't remember the words. Instead, I went back to Nana's things, searching for anything I had missed. Inside the ceramic dish beneath a cracked rosary, I found a folded paper. A prayer I didn't recognize. Not Italian, not Latin, just strange syllables. The bottom of the note had her handwriting barely legible. If it follows you, burn the thread. If it stays, offer your blood. I have one more letter from a fan I'd like to read to you this week. It reads, "Hi guys, I'm fairly new to the podcast and was just listening to episode 140 when one of the stories about the doppelganger got me thinking. If you were born a twin, are you being raised with your doppelganger without you knowing? Or do you both have twin doppelgangers out in the universe? I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts on the topic. A Snarled fan, Florence." I don't know, that's a really weird thought, but I do have to say the twins I have met do freak me out a little bit. And of course, the twins from The Shining are classic horror twins. So I think you're onto something, Florence. Please keep sending us letters by emailing somethingscary@snarled.com, and I might read them on the podcast. Sometimes it's not who you see in the mirror that's terrifying. It's who's seeing you back. Like in this story inspired by Avery. The year I got sick was awful. My mother says it was the flu. My father says it was just stress. But I know better. It started the night I saw myself standing at the end of the couch. I was 7 when the sickness began, not just a stomach bug, not a cold. It was something deeper, something with eyes. I vomited for days without fever or cause. Hospitals shrugged. My mother, exhausted, moved me downstairs to the cold den, the one with the sunken floor and heavy curtains. She said I needed space to sleep. I think she just didn't want me in the room anymore. I don't remember falling asleep, I remember the shadows. At 3:08 a.m., I woke to the sound of my dog barking, pacing in frantic circles, whining like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. I pulled her onto the couch beside me and closed my eyes. But I felt something, not the dog, not a draft, a presence, thick, watching. When I opened my eyes, I saw someone at the foot of the couch, someone shaped like me. Same pajamas, same posture, same face. Except she looked older, and her smile stretched too wide, like it had been carved into her skin. Her eyes didn't blink, just stared. I tried to speak, "Hello?" but no sound came out. I ducked under the blanket like kids do, because fairy tales tell us blankets are safe, but they lie. Because when I peeked again, she wasn't at the foot of the couch anymore. She was beside me. Her face inches from mine, watching, smiling. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. I tried reaching for my iPad on the table, anything to feel real. But the second I reached out, she touched my arm, ice cold fingers, rigid, unhuman. I blacked out. When I woke, my mother was shaking me awake for breakfast. Sunlight spilled through the curtains like none of it had happened. But the bruises on my arm, 5 round indentations, told a different story. I showed them. She dismissed it. "You probably rolled off the coffee table." I told them everything. My parents smiled that tight smile adults do when they think you're just being dramatic. They said I had an overactive imagination. They never mentioned it again. But she came back, not every night, just when I started to forget her. She'd watch from corners behind glass, in the dark blur between waking and dreaming, always smiling, always waiting. By the time I was 9, I learned not to tell anyone, not when I saw her outside my school window, not when she mirrored my movements in the bathroom mirror, but a beat too late. Like she was lagging behind, not when she stood at the edge of my bed whispering things that weren't in my voice. Things like, "You are the copy, you're the one who doesn't belong." She started mimicking people I knew, my mother, calling my name from outside the door while I heard her actually washing dishes in the kitchen. My brother asking to play games from the hallway even though he was asleep. They never noticed her, only me. That was the worst part. I was alone. When I turned 11, I asked my grandmother Nana about it. She was the only one who took me seriously. She didn't laugh. She didn't tell me it was a dream. Instead, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you see yourself, you must never speak it, never follow it, and never ever believe what it says." When I asked why, she crossed herself and whispered, "Some mirrors don't know reflections. They show replacements." That year, I started wearing the red cord she gave me, blessed," she said. "Protection." I wore it to bed, in the shower, to school, and for a while, things were quiet until the cord snapped. It didn't fray. It tore like something had bitten through it. That night, I saw her again, in the hallway, staring at my bedroom door, not moving, just waiting. When I tried to close the door, it was stuck, not jammed, held. I couldn't sleep, couldn't even blink without seeing her wide, static smile burned into my eyes. I prayed, not because I believed, but because I had nothing else left, and something answered, not in words, in dread. The next morning, there was a note slid under my door, torn notebook paper, shaking, handwriting I didn't recognize, and it said, "You're getting blurry. Let me help." And it was signed, me. I tried to tell myself someone was playing a trick, that this was all a long nightmare I hadn't woken from. But that day at school, my teacher asked why I kept staring blankly into space. Except I hadn't. She said I spoke to her in class and acted strange, but I don't remember any of it. That night, I stared into the mirror for a long time. I wanted to catch her behind me, but when I blinked, she was in front of me instead. We locked eyes. She smiled, wider than before, and mouthed the words, "Ready to trade." I screamed, smashed the mirror, bloodied my hand. My parents found me sobbing, surrounded by glass. They said I was sleepwalking, that I needed therapy. They said my mind was making it all up, but they were wrong. Because after that night, the world felt different. My reflection stopped syncing with me entirely. It lagged. It blinked when I didn't. Sometimes it would just stare frozen while I moved. I stopped looking in mirrors, stopped trusting them. And then one morning, I saw my brother watching me eat breakfast, only my real brother was still asleep. The one watching didn't blink. I ran. I don't know when the real world stopped, or if it ever existed. All I know is I'm 13 now, and sometimes I feel like I'm her. Sometimes I laugh without meaning to. Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize the way my face moves. My parents don't notice, but my dog does. She doesn't come near me anymore. And the other night, I found a note on my pillow, folded, familiar shaky handwriting, and it said, "You said it would never work, but you believed just a little. That's all it takes." The worst part, I don't remember writing it, but it's signed with my name. Have you ever caught your reflection doing something it shouldn't? What would you do if someone who looked exactly like you started living your life? Had this ever happened to you? Tell us your stories by sending me an email at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman. If you have a story you'd like to submit, send me an email at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. Don't forget to watch the video version of Something Scary over at youtube.com/snarled. And if you'd like to support the show and everything we do at Snarled, join our Patreon at patreon.com/snarled.